So, Bruntz, full disclosure, you were pretty calm at the half. I'm not just pumping you up and because you weren't super excitable, but was that more your personality or did you feel pretty good?
No, I mean, I think it was probably me just coming to terms with what I just watched. Like, I mean, the special team stuff was like, hide the women and children bad. But I think the thing that was probably the most frustrating was just you felt like you completely dominated that half of football and you had nothing to show for it because the offense was driving the ball. They were moving it relatively well, and it felt like the defense really had things under control. And I think the prevailing feeling, at least it was that on my message board, it seemed like, was that Nebraska has. We talked about it going into that game. Nebraska's lost to bad Purdue teams there before by just not going in and taking care of business. And I thought it was interesting after the game and talking to players that I forget who it was, that it might have been Sire Wright, but he said that Matt Rule was more calm. Or, no, it's Ty Robinson. Matt Rule was more calm at halftime of that game than he was at any of their other games. Like he's just peeling the paint against Colorado, but against Purdue was pretty calm. So I don't know. I mean, I think within the locker room over there, they felt like even though the first half didn't obviously go the way they wanted it to, that they were still going to win the fight, even though it was going to have to go a little bit longer than what they probably thought going in. So
that was interesting to hear Ty say that too, Bruntzy, because at one point during the game, I said, God, and I jinxed it because he got the 15-yarder a little later, but I said, this is probably the most calm I've seen Coach Rule on the sidelines given what was going on. And I also loved when he came out of the half, he told Jess, he said, listen, this is what it is. It's a close game. We got a chance to win. Our team needs this. Like, let's go play football. And I just for me, it was like an inspirational moment just listening because I'm like, well, yeah, why don't I just look at it like that? Like, this is an opportunity. And maybe that's what those guys were hearing at the half too.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of times football coaches and players say that they don't pay attention to what's out there. I think Matt Rule is very aware of what is out there about his team and the types of games that they've won and not won. And from talking to the players, he really hammered home the fact that, look, this is the type of game that people say that we don't win, where it's the tight games, where things maybe aren't going perfectly. And he told them flat out, this is an opportunity to change that narrative about what kind of a team we are. So I think guys really kind of hooked onto that. And, guys just kind of started making plays. I mean, I think there's been a lot of talk this week about John Bullock, and for good reason, but that third down stop that he had was huge on that drive coming out of halftime to force the field goal. And I think that kind of calmed things down a little bit, but I think they're very aware of kind of the big picture over there and kind of what team they are. And I legitimately think that there's still kind of this question of, okay, well, what kind of a team is this really? And, you kind of needed to have a game like that on the road, I think, to kind of get a sense of maybe where they're at, because for the most part that they've gotten up early and run away from teams, except for that Illinois game. So that was a different look that Nebraska kind of had to deal with there.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntz, as you kind of experience that consternation you were talking about at halftime, how much of it, because I've been trying to figure this out all week, is how much of it had to do with what you actually saw, like the special teams, for instance, right? Just how bad that was, what you actually saw either on Saturday or what you've seen from this team throughout the year, and how much of it really is just kind of the PTSD of what we've seen from teams that really have nothing to do with this specific team.
Well, it's in the context of your question, it's kind of like, well, the field goal issues lead into the PTSD. Like the reason that the PTSD exists is because Nebraska has done things like they were doing in the kicking game. And I don't know. I mean, there should be legitimate concerns about the kicking game. I mean, when
Sure.
you can't make a field goal, basically when you got to get inside the 10 to make a field goal, that's a challenge for an offense that I think can move the ball relatively well, but is going to need to be able to cash in on some of those trips into opponent's territory. So, I think it's a legitimate concern. I think it's also kind of comes to the front of mind when it's just really kind of laid bare like that. I mean, and when you kind of dig into it a little bit more, it's not just, a guy hooking a kick. I mean, if you can't even get the snap back and you're switching snappers in and out of the game and things like that, I mean, it's not ideal by any means. So I think, to your question too, I mean, I think there is still a lingering feeling of, okay, we've watched this movie for 10 years where Nebraska's found new ways to lose close games. You need to see Nebraska win a few of those before you can kind of shake that feeling, I feel like.
Bruntz, I kind of surmise this as Nebraska being not only dialed because you want to be 5-1 heading into the bye on a good note, but I think there's this thing where Nebraska's focused on Rutgers not being a better version at this stage than Nebraska is at being similar teams, right? Then there's the whole parallels between Coach Rule and the reverence that he has for Coach Schiano. How important is it for Nebraska to understand that Rutgers can't be a better version of Nebraska right now, especially in Lincoln?
Yeah, I mean, they got to – it's kind of gut check time for Nebraska. I mean, I think when you kind of dig in a little bit more, it feels like the types of things that Rutgers does well are things that Nebraska at times this year has really kind of struggled with. And I think it's going to, I think Nebraska is a little bit more explosive in the passing game on offense than what Rutgers is going to be. I do think, though, that the types of identity type things that both teams want to do, there's similarities there. And Nebraska is going to have one of those kind of dialed in 4-quarter games and understand that you're probably going to be in a tight game late again. I mean, that's the way that Rutgers plays. That's the way that Nebraska is going to play. And it's a little bit of an identity game, I think, just to kind of, continue to build on what they did last week against Purdue. With what Rutgers does on offense, you're going to have to tackle really well. So you're going to have to carry that over from what you did in West Lafayette. You're going to have to win up front on defense, which I thought they did a better job of doing that against Purdue than they did against Illinois. And then it's special teams is going to really kind of need to be as dialed in as it can, because Rutgers is going to, get after Nebraska and for good reason. And there might also be an opportunity too for Nebraska to do something on special teams. I mean, Rutgers has given up block punts. If you look at the numbers, Rutgers' punt return defense is not very good nationally. They've given up a few big plays, so there might be an alleyway or two there if Nebraska can find it. So it's going to be a challenging game, and it's, stylistically, I think you're right. I mean, Nebraska needs to be a better version of itself, because I think Rutgers kind of sees itself in the same way that Nebraska and Matt Rule do.
Bruntz, how much do you think Nebraska can change the narrative about special teams with some of the things you're talking about, right? Let's say the field goals continue to struggle, maybe not to the extent that they did against Purdue, but kind of the way they've been throughout the last year and a half, basically. Like, how much can they change the narrative with either a block kick or they find an alley on a punt return or something like that, in terms of like, hey, it's not all negative. They're just struggling in this one specific area.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of even the way it is now, though. The net punting number has not been great, but I think Brian Bushini's kicked it relatively well. Yeah. Field position-wise, Nebraska's actually doing really well this year with starting field position. That's something they've always struggled with. And a lot of it has just, frankly, been good decision-making by Isaiah Garcia-Castaneda. I mean, he catches kicks when he's supposed to. He, lets them bounce when he's supposed to. That's been kind of a bugaboo for Nebraska for a while now, that it's not, the flashy DeMornay Pearson-L plays, but just fair catching a kick when you need to. And they've done a good job of that. But yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, I mean, it's like if you block a punt or you get a big return, it's a little bit of it's kind of like a, hey, look over here, look what we did over here kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. Kind of a flash play. But those are big plays in the course of a game. And when you're playing one-score games, I mean, it can really change momentum and can help your offense a ton too. So if they're able to block one, and they've gotten close a few times this year, I mean, that would be pretty big and at least distracting from the narrative of what it is right now. But I mean, I am a little bit fascinated to see how decision making and whatever is in that book and whatever the analytics say is changed by kind of what Nebraska's situation is right now.
If at the almost the halfway point, if Bullock is your defensive MVP, who's next in voting?
I would say I would go with Ty Robinson. I feel comfortable with that. I mean, I don't know if he had a great game against Illinois, but I think coming into the season, you were kind of hoping that what he could be this year would be cashing in on some of the plays that he was close to making at the end of last year. And I think for the most part, he's done a pretty nice job of that. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. There's like an under the radar guy that I could shock and awe you with, but I don't know that there's somebody that immediately comes to mind.
I thought
MJ Sherman.
That's why I thought you were going to say, because you're kind of a deep pool guy. I thought you may go with MJ Sherman.
Yeah, I mean he's playing at a different level than what he has been, and I think he would deserve deserve to be in that conversation. But I think Ty Robinson probably. I think his impact probably gets overlooked a little bit because you're like, yeah, these are the plays that we kind of thought he should be making, but the fact that he's actually making them, is noteworthy. I know the NFL scout that I was sitting next to at West Lafayette was pretty bullish on what his prospects were going to be next spring. So there's that too.
Were you more excited to sit next to NFL scouts or try to get a gauge on Cheez-It Bowl reps?
What was the last part? I didn't catch it.
I said, were you more excited to sit next to NFL scouts or to try to get a good gauge on Cheez-It Bowl reps the week before?
Well, were they there? Were the Cheez-It Bowls?
No. I would have texted you. No. I just wanted to see. I would have been watching to see if he was just going to flip Cheez-Its, but no. I knew you were equally as excited, so I just was curious.
I would have. I didn't see the trail of Cheez-Its around the press box, so I didn't think they were there.
What'd you do with all the Werther wrappers?
BC was just inhaling those during the Vikings Packers game. There were some nerves in the second half. It was like those Werthers were like,
give me another Werther.
Yeah.
So, Bruntz,
my man is turning and burning wrapped candy.
You got people under 70 choosing just to smash Werthers. Is that what I'm understanding?
Ask Brian the next time you have him on next week. He's a big Werther's guy, and there's apparently he has assured me, and I've not tried these, but there has been big technological advancements in what Werther's is doing. There's like a chewy Werther's now that Brian swears by, and I can't pretend like I wasn't also having some of the car too, but
it was the greatest. It was the greatest no context picture ever that you said. Yeah. I was in tears.
The fact that BC is up on like the latest Werther's breaking news and technological advancements is the most like on brand thing I've ever heard in my life.
Tracks, right?
It's hilarious.
Yeah. No, ask him. He'll get up on the table for chewy Werthers.
But Bruntz, let's switch to the other side of the ball, and I'm going to take Dylan Raiola out of the equation here. I'll ask the same question that DB asked. Who's your offensive MVP outside of Dylan Raiola through the first 5-6 games of the season?
Oh,
that's tough.
It is tough.
You could pick one receiver every week almost.
Yeah, no, that's why it's tough, right? Because it's like, no, maybe this other guy. No.
Is it Nair? I mean, I would go Nair.
How about him only having one catch the other day? It's
Yeah,
like
that was-
who are you going to try to take away if you're playing Nebraska?
Yeah, I mean that, and I felt like a little bit like the previous 2 weeks that Jamal Banks has kind of been like the distraction, right? Like, we're just going to send you on routes and let Travis Hunter chase you and hope that, we can hurt the other guys. But I don't know. It's a tough question. I mean, you could say Emmett Johnson at times. I think you could say Banks at times. I mean, I don't. It's Raiola and then like the whole cast of characters, and I feel like that's kind of. I don't know. I mean, that's just there's a depth there. I don't. You could say Ja'Cory Barney, I guess, just based on the last couple of games. I think he's going to be more in that conversation by the time the season's over. But I don't think there's like a front runner in that group of like, hey, this is the guy.
Is there
like there is kind of on defense? Is
there a specific lineman that you would like look at as standing above the others, or is it kind of a unit for you?
Probably the group. I mean, I've been impressed with what Gunnar Gatula's stepped in and done. I mean, when you consider that this is basically your third string left tackle and you put him in there and you didn't even really notice he was there, that's a pretty good sign. He's been steady, but I don't know. I think it's probably just the group. I mean, I think that's the strength of the line right now is just that you can kind of plug and play guys a little bit and not really miss all that much.
Hey, Bruntz, how many receivers do you think Nebraska has with double-digit catches, including hand sweeps?
For the year?
Yeah.
Oh, double digits. I don't know, 6, 7.
Not bad.
Like,
5.
5?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of it seems like a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is. That is a lot.
And the guy that we think is the most explosive hasn't really done it with traditional pass catching. He's done it with running
with the other stuff
because he has the lowest yards per catch average, which doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Yeah. They spread it around. That's a good thing, though.
That's our guy, Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Bruntsy, we appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
See if I can get some Cheez-Its into the booth for you on Saturday.